So without further ado, we are going to start our discussion with Zander Keig, who is a licensed clinical social worker. Zander is a wellness, mindfulness, and belonging facilitator. He's WPATH certified and is a gender specialist with WPATH as a GEI Advanced Mental Health Clinical Care Instructor. Zander Keig is also the recipient of the 2020 WPATH Henry Benjamin Distinguished Educator Award, which is offered through the National Association of Social Workers. So it's a pretty distinguished award, and we are so lucky to have Zander joining us and discuss the work that Zander has been doing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Ball. It's good to be with you tonight.
We are super excited to jump into this discussion, and you're doing such amazing work, and we just want to really appreciate you, your efforts, and your time. And with everything that's going on, I first want to just ask, how are you doing?
Oh, thank you. I'm actually doing quite well. I've been keeping busy with work, and I'm the caregiver for my father, who's 80 and has dementia now. So I spend as much time with him as possible. I'm married, about to celebrate my 19th anniversary. So I'm very happy about that and being able to spend time with my wife. So I find that I'm surrounding myself with a lot of love and support, and that really helps with everything that's going on. You know, it really helps to have that.
Thank you. And I imagine in your field, it ends up being a great resource having that support. So, you know, we're in a clinical field and there's a lot happening. So can you tell us how you came to work in the specialized field, and what drew you to the work that you're doing?
Well, you know, I come from a background of being in the military and law enforcement, so I have a commitment to wanting to be of service. And I actually thought about going to law school, and I took the LSAT and I went to law school, and I spent one term there and decided, oh no, I can't spend my whole life being around these kind of people, you know. And so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. I went to seminary and got a degree in theology, and eventually I went I became a social worker because I just wasn't finding the specific niche that I was looking to be in. And so I was doing case management work, and that's how I learned about social workers. I sort of knew about social workers because I'm a product of the system. I was in group homes as a young person, so I knew about social workers, but I didn't know that social workers worked in so many different contexts. Right. I just thought it was only social, you know, child welfare services. And so I found myself in social work. My first job out of school was with the VA. And so I was working with homeless veterans for about 4 years, and then I moved over to working with the Navy for about 3.5 years. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm currently doing what's called like meso social work, right? So there's micro social work working with individuals, and the macro social work maybe working with big companies or the government or on policy. But what I've been doing is with the wellness consulting is it's a preventative kind of social work, because I'm working with people who are either experiencing compassion fatigue or burnout, or, you know, they're having difficulty navigating through uncertainty and anxiety and depression. And so instead of doing psychotherapy with them, I'm doing psychoeducation with them, and I'm teaching them the skills and the tools that they can use to improve their situation, you know, at least to a point where they're not burning out and ending up on my colleagues, you know, couches.
Well, I think that's such an important factor. Like right now, I imagine business is booming. Unfortunately, it's kind of a mixed bag. But to be able to provide that to that community, and I'm so glad that you said you're offering more of a meso, like working within the meso system, because often we only hear about those who are working on the macro level or the micro level. So we don't have this lovely bridge. So it's great to hear about the fact that you are in between and supporting this community. So with all the work that you've been doing, of course, you've been recognized for it. And so you were awarded the National Association of Social Workers Social Worker of the Year Award this past year. Can you tell us how you earned that and what amazing things you've been doing to receive such a distinguished award?
Well, thank you for that. So, well, it's kind of a multi-stepped process, actually. You have to be a member of the National Association for Social Workers, and then you have to be nominated and selected to be a state social worker of the year first. So I was the California Social Worker of the Year in 2018. And then every 2 years, every state sends the Social Workers of the Year names to the national office, and then at the national level, they pick one person from all of those like 100 social workers of the year from the states. And so it was really my work when I was in California as a social worker, working with the VA, working with the Transgender American Veterans Association, working with the Navy, right? That got that's people noticed what I was doing and they appreciated what I was doing. And so I was nominated as a result of that work.
I mean, I can only imagine what your experience has been like with working with the transgender community within the military. There's been a lot of controversy, not necessarily in a great direction, but the work that you're doing is definitely stemming the tide. So I imagine like you've been such a welcome resource in many ways. And I'm wondering if you can tell us about that work and your involvement with WPATH or WPATH.
Absolutely. So I transferred from the VA to the Navy. I had talked to some friends who were working in the Department of Defense, and I kept asking them, is there going to be open transgender service? Is there going to, right, as soon as Obama was elected, I was like, how long is it going to take? When are we going to get open service? And I'm actually quite disappointed that it happened in the last 6 months of his second term. I really wish it would have come sooner, because it would have been more difficult to get rid of so easily. But you know, it was what it was, and I knew it was coming because people who were involved in the process of getting it approved were telling me that it was coming. And so I started looking for jobs with any of the military branches, because I knew that once open service came into being, there weren't going to be enough military medical providers who knew how to work with the trans community. And so since I had worked with trans veterans in both the VA and with Transgender American Veterans Association, I am a veteran, I am a trans man, right? So it's like coming from both the professional and the personal experience. I knew that if I could get my foot in the door, I'd probably have a good chance of being able to work with active duty service members who wanted to go through a gender transition. And I was absolutely right. I applied for my job in October of 2015. I was interviewed in January of 2016. My first day on the job was May 30th, 2016. And 1 month later, the open service policy came out, announcing that starting October 1, people would be able to, right? That's the fiscal year for the military, right? So starting October 1. And so as soon as that announcement came out, and our commanding officer sent out an email saying, here's the memo, there's going to be a policy. Once it's drafted, I'll let you know what's going on. It wasn't to me, it was like to the whole command. And so I hit reply, just to the commanding officer. I didn't hit reply all. And I wrote a letter to her and reminded her that we had just met like a month earlier during my onboarding, and who I was and what I did with veterans and the transgender, community. And so I was invited to the very first meeting on July 22nd of 2016 to discuss what was about to come, and appointed the case manager for what became the Navy Medicine West Transgender Care Team at Naval Medical Center, San Diego. So I was involved from the very beginning of setting up the intake process, the orientation process, the database, the case consultation process. I worked with just over 300 active duty service members between August of 2016 and May of 2019, when I left to go become a caretaker for my father.
So you were really instrumental in building this from the ground up. So
Absolutely.
So amazing. And, I definitely hear that you put a lot of time, thought, effort. And I just to be honest, I'm pretty amazed at how quickly you were able to get through the military hiring, because that is I know to some of our listeners that might sound like, oh, it was like 6 to 8 months. That's still very rapid.
Yeah, well, and it was a transfer because I was already with the VA. So, yeah.
So they moved you pretty quickly, and I'm so glad to hear that they were willing and able to be open and listen to this need, because for so long this has been an issue within our military. So it's so nice to hear that not only were you instrumental in building this program, you're helping to stem a tide within our military.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great team. We had, so many different disciplines, endocrinology and plastic surgery and psychology and nursing. I mean, we had so many, right? Primary care. It was a great team. Most of them were military officers, right? They were in uniform and they did a fantastic job. There was also Navy Medicine East, which had, right, because Navy Medicine West covered the Pacific Islands, Asia, Western United States. I mean, I was mostly telehealth. I was working with, these active duty service members, 300 of them almost. They were spread all out throughout the Navy Medicine West region. So then the Army had their own teams. The Air Force had their one singular team in San Antonio. So I was able to also consult several times with the Air Force team. And so that was really helpful. That was rewarding to be able to contribute to what the Air Force was developing also.
That's so awesome. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your work with transgender veterans and also like if you can share what were some of the or even if they're currently some of the obstacles that you've run into with getting this plan up and off the ground.
So with veterans, right? Because before we were talking about active duty with military, so I can switch over to veterans. So when I worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I was pretty quickly after getting onboarded, I was appointed to the national work group. Well, two of them actually over the course of about 6 months. The national work group dealing with LGBT patient care and the national work group dealing with LGBT employee issues through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so I was able to be part of the patient care team developing trainings for staff that are now video, they're videos on that staff can watch to teach them about the directive of how to work with LGBT veterans and work with transgender and intersex veterans. And so, and I think they use language now like in other gender, sex and gender identities. They've sort of expanded now because it's, the community is constantly growing. And so I was able, in addition to being a social worker with the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program, this was one of the side things that I did, one of the extra jobs. On the employee side, I was able to work in a 4-member team to draft guidance for trans employees who wanted to transition on the job. So I was instrumental in getting that project from start to finish, which is now not policy at VA, but it's a guidebook that's available to any employee or any manager or supervisor that wants to, it has an employee that's transitioning on the job. But as a board member for the Transgender American Veterans Association, I was also working, as we all were, as liaisons between the trans veteran community and the VA. And so if they were having issues navigating, then we could connect them with a member of the National LGBT Health Program or the National Transgender Care Coordinator or the local LGBT Veteran Care Coordinator at their local VA medical center, right? So we could connect them with the people that could assist them in navigating a system or maybe getting a new provider, something like that. So it was a lot of really great work. I mean, as a veteran myself, I utilize the VA for my health care. I don't have health insurance. And so all my health care comes through the VA. And so I've had to navigate it also as a patient since 1988. And as a transgender person, right, I get my hormones through the VA. And I also get care for like some of my post-operative care that I need. I get all of that through the VA. It's kind of slow, but I still get it, right? I have to do a bit more advocating for myself than I'd like to, but I know what I can do. I know how to do it. So I'm doing it.
So I'm curious if you can talk about, just knowing that you can advocate for yourself. And I imagine these are skills that you're teaching a lot of the individuals that you're working with. Can you share with us what your experience has been with working with transgender military personnel who are navigating a command approved gender transition?
Well, for now, they probably have to wait until the official policy comes out, right? It's like, just like the hiring process takes a long time. So there is an executive order in place, but that doesn't mean that immediately things change, right? So they have to wait until the 2 different lines of policy come out, the the administrative or the personnel or the medical. And they will be very clear in what the path is to follow. So when I was with the transgender care team, the service member would go to their medical provider or mental health provider for their command, or at a branch clinic, if that's where they were going. And they would disclose that they were trans, and they would be assessed and diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then they would be forwarded over to the transgender care team. I don't know if that's how it's going to be working. But I do know that there's a wonderful resource for anybody who's active duty or working with people who are active duty, who are trans, or any kind of, not gender non-conforming, gender non-binary, who want to do medical transition specifically. They can reach out to Sparta, 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 spartapride.org. They're also on Facebook, Sparta. Great organization.
And we'll have that link, I believe, in our chat as a resource, and it will also be accessible after the discussion too, for anyone who is interested. And just for clinicians, if you have clients on your caseload, this is just great information to share. Maybe it's not them specifically, but it might be a family member. And I think, having these resources can be super duper useful. So
I was going to say that for veterans, the Transgender American Veterans Association at transveteran.org is also, that's, they're basically one organization for active duty and one for veterans.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So, there are a few considerations when working with the transgender youth and their families. What would you say a therapist should be doing, what knowledge they should have before they begin working with someone who is part of the transgender population? So if they never had any experience, what would you recommend that they start doing if that's a population that they'd like to serve?
Absolutely. And it's really great that they'd like to be doing that. So there's several things that people could do. They could go to a 1 or 2 day training put on by, say, Gender Odyssey's professional conference that happens in Seattle and either San Diego or Los Angeles. Sometimes they move around. It's been in San Diego the last couple of years, so Gender Odyssey Professional Conference. They can also connect in with an organization called Trans Youth Family Allies, which is a national organization made up of, it's like PFLAG for parents with trans school-age kids. And, there are lots and lots of books, right? The Transgender Child. There's an organization called Gender Spectrum. So people can go, and Gender Spectrum also does a conference. And there are probably a lot of them are virtual now, so they're easier to attend, right? So there are conferences, there are trans conferences that specialize in working with families so that you can go and take, do workshops there and maybe even get continuing education units. The Trans Philly Health Conference in Philadelphia, they have a family track and a behavioral health track, so people can go to a lot of different conferences. There's also something called the LGBT Health Education Center, I believe, LGBT Health Education Center, and they have a lot of free online webinars that people can take to learn about the LGBT youth and trans youth in particular. So there's a lot of things that people could do, but definitely connecting in with an organization like Trans Youth Family Allies, or Trans Family SOS in San Diego. They're Gender Spectrum, of course, up in the Bay Area. So there's a lot of different organizations.
So it sounds like definitely being able to educate yourself as much as you possibly can, but also connecting with others who are doing the work and others who are able to support them. Because I imagine this is not like you just go for a weekend and then, yay, you're an expert. But rather, this is an intro and sharing some information, especially on how you're going to be entering into the community, and the ongoing work. I imagine they'll be sharing, like, here's some more work you can do. Here's other resources that you can tap into.
Absolutely. Well, and you asked me about WPATH earlier, and that's where WPATH might come in too. If people are interested, you become a member of WPATH. And then you can become WPATH certified. And so it's multiple, it's like it's like 2 full days of foundational classes and then 2 full days of advanced classes. And in the advanced behavioral health where I teach, we have an adult and a youth track. And so I teach on the adult side because I don't work with youth. But there is a youth, they're youth specific, right? So for people who want to work with young people, so people can do something like that. They can go through the W path, gender or global education initiative training to become certified. Yeah.
Awesome. And I believe we'll also have that information listed as one of our resources. If it's not in the chat, it will definitely be available after our discussion. So you've given us such great information and have really kind of outlined a number of resources for us. So, definitely it's on us, the onus is on us to definitely do that work and learn.
Well, it's a social work, it's an occupational hazard, we can't not resource.
Which is really one of the things I absolutely love about social work. It's not just that you provide resources, but that you're not afraid to get in on the ground and explore and become, connected with the individuals that you're working with. And I know I'm going to kind of make a statement that some psychologists may not like. I'm a psychologist myself, but historically our field has not been so inviting and so curious. I mean, we're curious in a clinical sense, but sometimes stepping outside of that is just as important as doing the clinical work. And so I really appreciate the views that social work brings to the field, because it's super important to be in that bridge, not just to assign to others to do that work, but to kind of sometimes step into a role where you're helping our clients find those resources and finding individuals like you who can be that bridge. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And
Absolutely.
I really want you to also be able to share with us, like, how your work, how are you integrating the topic or transgender topics into your work currently? And how are you doing, especially now with, COVID, being a wellness and belonging facilitator? How are you fostering that belonging and that connection with the clients you serve?
So, when I'm doing the wellness webinars, when I'm setting them up with the, either with the HR or the DEI person or with the EAP company that I'm on contract with, I let them know, like, oh, and I also do these other things. I let them know about some of the things that I do, because they ask me, what else do you do? And so what I've done on several occasions now is I've had companies send me their HR policies that have to do with, with the transgender employees. And all the different identities, the trans and gender non-binary and gender diverse, and also the people who have kids that are, from these various communities, right? So they have these policies they're putting out, and then they also have health insurance plans, and they want to make sure they're the most comprehensive that they can get. And so they send me over those documents, and I review them, and I give them feedback on ways that they can expand and they can augment and supplement what they've already done.
Nice. I mean, the fact that they're even asking is so awesome, because you're helping them to ensure that they do have inclusive services, not just for their employees, but for their families. And
one other thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
One other thing, one of the EAP companies that I contract through, we recently put together a series. I helped them put together a series. The one is for trans and other gender diverse identities. One is for the partners of those individuals. One is for the family members of those individuals, and one is for those who want to be allies. And so the allyship one is like a listen and learn. It's like a 90-minute take in information. The other three are discussion based. So they're starting with a simple prompt question. There's no screen, there's no slides being shown. It's just dialogue. And so I've done one of those so far, and it was so successful that they're adding a second one. And the reason for that is people are really just, they're feeling isolated. They're feeling disconnected. And And so we had people from all over the world in this chat, right, in this live Zoom discussion, and with a lot of shared experience. And one thing, and I'll mention this because the clinicians might not have heard of this yet, and if you have, I just want to reinforce that there are people who started gender affirming hormones during the pandemic, and they haven't navigated the world outside of their home as the person they now look and sound like, the person they're presenting out into the world, right, through their clothing and their hair. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that they're now sitting with. It's like, what's that going to be like? Because they didn't get the slow introduction to how people were going to be seeing them and treating them. It's just going to be boom, it's going to happen. So yeah.
I think that's such a great point, and I'm so glad that you're bringing it up for our clinicians, because it is something that we should not only be aware of, but might be able to provide support for. So if there are individuals coming back into society, so to speak, since we've all been pretty much sheltered for a year, how to help either family members, coworkers, or friends have conversations. And I think that's been a very large part of the non-transgender community, where it's, addressing pronouns and practicing and being really mindful. I feel like we need a lot more work in that. And just as a whole, as a world, we need more practice and more conversation. So it sounds like this would be also a great time to reiterate, like, being mindful, being thoughtful, asking questions, being curious about pronouns, not just making assumptions. So doing that work, and in some ways, it sounds like there's some advocacy there for making, changes on not just a state level, but also possibly a federal level, about how to advocate for this community. So what suggestions might you have for advocacy for, state laws, or just changes even maybe at the federal level?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are organizations, LGBT organizations in particular, and then our professional associations. So, for example, a lot of states have equality offices, right? There's Equality Florida here. There's Equality California. So these are state-based organizations that are working specifically on, mostly on laws. So they're working with the state, right, legislators. Excuse me. And then there's, in my case, the National Association for Social Workers has an action center. And so I can go into the action center and I can read through all the various bills and rulings, all kinds of, it's like, it's state-based and national. And I can add to the language that's already there, and it'll automatically be sent off to my local representative. So, I could go to all of their different websites, but I'd rather just go to the Action Center, because then it's going to send it out for me. So it's going to send it out to multiple people at once, rather than having to go from website to website to website for all of your local members of Congress. So that, I would highly recommend that, people look into what is their professional association providing. And then also, if there's an equality organization in their state, to look into, what work they're doing. And then there's always if people are politically inclined, there's always the politically affiliated, clubs, people who come together that are part of certain political parties. And I'm not going to raise one over the other, but just say, political parties. And so they have meetings, they get together and meet, and they talk about things that are going on at the local level, the city level, the county level, and then the state level. So it depends on to what degree you want to get involved. There's so many different ways to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all this rich information and all of the resources. I think many of our viewership will really enjoy using these resources to strengthen their knowledge and create new foundational skills that they'll use for a very long time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. It's been an honor to be invited. So I want to say thank you to Michelle for inviting me to be a speaker tonight. Thank you, Dr. Haley, and Dr. Ball, especially for asking me being the interviewer. I appreciate that. I've done that job, so I know what that's like.
Not a problem. You've been such a wonderful guest, and we really, really do enjoy, speaking with you. And we are so enthralled with the work that you do, and we really, really commend you. And can't wait to hear. Of course, we're going to invite you again, but can't wait to hear about all the new developments that are coming down the pipe, hopefully soon, because we always need to stay up to date.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. It was lovely chatting with you. And we'll